What is going on, guys? And in this video we are going to talk about how to use variables in C programming language. We are going to talk about variables declaration, variables assignment, and also how to read an input from the user. So in the previous video we've talked about how variables are similar to boxes. Now let's understand how we can create variables. So let's introduce the variables declaration. This will usually be the first step for working with variables, and that makes sense because variable declaration is the same as box creation. So variable declaration is equivalent to variable creation, and it simply states that you just create some variable in the memory of your computer. And how do you create a variable in C language? The structure is very straightforward. First of all, you specify the type of the variable, and then you specify its name, and of course at the end you add a semicolon. For example, if we wanted to create a variable of type integer that will store our age, we would first of all specify its type, which is int, and then specify its name, for example, age. So we have a variable named age, and it is of type int. So once again, this way you created a variable called age and it's of type int to hold integer values. And let's say you wanted to create a variable of type double, which is used to hold floating point values. So in this case, the type of the variable at the declaration phase should be specified as double. Then, in the same way, we will give this variable a name, for example temp, which will be used to hold the temperature in Celsius or Fahrenheit degrees. So just use double temp. Double is the type, temp is the name of the variable, and the semicolon at the end to specify that we've done with our variable declaration. So the structure for creating variables in C language will be pretty much always the same. You first of all specify the type of the variable to be created, then you specify the variable's name, and at the end, of course, you add a semicolon. So to summarize this thing a little bit, whenever you want to work with a variable, you need first of all to create it. And how can you create it? By using variable declaration. Specify its type, then give its name, add a semicolon at the end, and your variable is ready to go. So now let's talk about an assignment operation. So once you have your variable, you may want to put something inside of it, right? Simply to let it hold some value. That's what variables are all about. And this operation, when you want to put some value in a variable, is called an assignment. To assign some value to a variable. So how should it be done in our C programming language? The variable itself has a type. Either that's an integer, a floating point, a character, or whatnot. And in most cases, we will put inside of that variable some value that matches the variable's type. So how will it look like in C? Previously we declared or created two variables. The first one was age and the second one was temperature. And we can see that the variable age is of type int, right? We can see it in the declaration phase, int age. That means we expect to assign it a value of an integer type, for example 30. So that's why we use age equals to 30. And we can see the assignment simply taking the value of its right, which is 30, and placing it into the variable called age on its left, a variable which we declared just one line above. So as simple as that, just assign a value to a given variable. And you can do pretty much the same for also the variable temp, which we declared using double temp. You can assign it a value of 26.5 for temperature in Celsius or 76.7 if you're using Fahrenheit, which is the same temperature just in different units. And you can see that the values are floating point numbers. We're using this dot thing, this 26.5.5. This indicates that this number is of floating point type. And that's okay because we declared the temperature variable as type double to hold floating point numbers. Alright, and by the way, in your next milestone, you're going to develop a program that will be capable of making this conversion between temperature given in Celsius to Fahrenheit degrees and vice versa. You're going basically to develop a weather station program. But we'll get to that later on in this chapter. So to summarize for now, the first step will usually be to create or declare a variable, and the second step will be to put something in that variable, or simply saying to assign some value to a given variable. And now we're going to talk about a very important part in this section, and it's called reading input from user, or variable as input. And that's a really important part, guys. It simply explains how your program can be reading data or information from the user, pretty much as you use forms that you fill on a website. The program that runs in the backend reads every field of this form and stores it in variables. And up to this point, we've learned how to create variables and how to use assignments to them as part of our program. And now what we would like to do is to get the value from the user instead of using the assignment operator. The assignment was done as part of our program, which means we simply used some hard-coded assignment and we set a value to a variable without the ability to give the user, we are the developers, right? And we also have the users, without providing the user with the ability to insert its value to that variable. We simply declared it and then assigned it a given value. For example, a grade is equal to 30. And what is the problem with that? Basically, there is no problem with using any of them. There is only a difference between when one should be used over the other. So once again, there may be cases where we would like to use assignment operator, and there may be other cases when you will need to use the input thing to get some information directly from the user, as we are going to see in the following examples. So suppose you have to write down a program that should calculate the average of 2 grades. One way to do so would be to define these two variables by using the assignment operation to set their values to, let's say, grade 1 equals to 80 and grade 2 equals to 100. First of all, we know that an average of 2 grades can be calculated by summing both of them and dividing the sum by 2. So the average would be simply 80 plus 100 divided by 2, which gives us a total of 90. So we can simply use the printf command to print to the screen that average equals to %d, and instead of this percentage, we will just replace it with a total of 90, right? The expression that on the right of the comma. And that's great, it would work, but in this example, we define the 2 grades. We as the developers. We've simply created a program that will always print the average for these specific grades when grade 1 equals to 80 and grade 2 equals to 100. And I guess you noticed that this program is not generic. It will always print the average 90, always print the same, unless we manually change the grades. And in such a case, we simply cannot sell or ship this program to customers because the program does not know anything except these 2 grades, 80 and 100. We want to give the user the ability to insert his own grades, and then our program will calculate the average grade and give the result to the user. And that's exactly why we learn to work with inputs. Now let's take a look at the syntax of how that should be done in our C programming language. So if we want to create a program that calculates the average grade of 2 given grades, we first of all need to declare these 2 variables. So we created grade 1 and also we create grade 2. And at this point, these 2 variables are kind of empty. We say that they contain garbage value that cannot be used. And we could assign some values to them, like we've seen previously, something like grade 1 equals to 80 and grade 2 equals to 100. But that's not exactly what we want to do. What we want to do is to read the grades from the console, to read the grades from the user. We want to let the user to provide his own grades, so then any user will be able to use our program with his own grades. And to do so, we'll use one little function that will help us with that. And this function is called scanf. So the syntax in C language for the input of the first grade looks like this. Scanf, %d, ampersand, grade 1. Don't panic just yet. Let's try to understand the structure of this command together. This function simply reads the value we insert in the console, and it refers to this value as an integer. That's why we have this %d, right? Just like we used %d in the printf command to print something to the console, Now we are reading from the console the input that the user will provide us with, and we treat it as an integer thanks to this %d. Pretty simple, right? And the value itself will be stored inside of grade 1 variable, which we've just created. And this ampersand sign, all it does is to specify that the value read from the console using this %d should go and be placed at the address where grade 1 resides. So once again, read an integer from the console and put it in the address where grade 1 resides, or simply put this value in grade 1 variable. So pretty much the same way we'll do this for grade 2. So now at this point we have two variables, grade 1 and grade 2, and they hold the grades that the user just provided using this console. And now let's print the average of them on the screen. There are actually a couple of ways that we can do it. One of them is just to write the mathematical operation in one printf line, something like that. Printf average equals to %d, and then to write the mathematical operation as we've seen previously. And there you go, your average grade should be printed on the screen. Average equals to 19 in our case. Pretty cool, right? Try to run this code on your own. Open CodeBlocks or Visual Studio or whatever IDE you use and try to run this code on your own and see how it works for you. One thing to mention here is that we didn't speak about anything related to casting, and that's actually the result of dividing the sum of your grades by 2. This result may be actually a floating point number, something like 97.5, and in our case it won't be printed correctly. The only thing that will be printed on the screen will probably be just 97. It will be just rounded. So one of the ways to handle that is to use casting. But for now and for this video, I think that's enough. I hope you got the idea of how the function scanf works and that you are ready to move on for your next challenges where we will practice that even more. So I wish you good luck, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.